Hey guys, Trevor with Shadow Systems, Technical Tuesday. I want to highlight a design feature on the DR920P, talk about assembly and disassembly, and just show you something to watch out for. Okay, so in my left hand, I have a current production DR920P. Most models out there are going to have this cavity on the bottom. This compensator is an earlier generation that doesn't have this cavity. It's got like a continuous kind of smooth surface right there. All right, so what's the difference? Well, there's no difference in performance, in fit, in compensation. All that stuff is the same. We just added this cavity when these guns started to be trialed by law enforcement because they were putting them in Safariland retention holsters that had a little plug right there that would go in the bottom of the G34 because, again, the gun fits a G34 size holster. So if it's just a typical holster that's not a retention holster, this is fine. Once we got into law enforcement retention holsters, we needed to have this cavity here so that it could be fully holstered. It wouldn't crash into that surface. Okay, so same comp, just a move or an additional cavity on the bottom. However, when we put this cavity in place, we actually had to move the retention spring for the pin. So there's a little spring in there, which I'll show you, that holds the pin in place, and we had to relocate that when we added this cavity. You'll notice on the earlier generation, there's a little screw hole right there. That screw was a little set screw that went in and retained the spring, and it was red Loctited in place, permanently installed. So when we added the cavity, we did away with that. And so I want to show you the difference. I wanted to do something kind of elegant that didn't require like a screw or something. We looked at moving the screw around, and that just didn't seem very slick. So we instead designed something that was, I think, pretty elegant. The spring retains the pin, and the pin retains the spring. So when it's installed in there, that little bend is actually, this pin is sitting like that, and that little bend is retaining the pin, and the pin is holding the spring from being able to fall out. Nice design, and you can replace the spring or take it out to clean or whatever. The problem is some people have actually lost that part and not noticed it. So you'll notice I'm working on a little mat here. If you're taking a gun apart, I always like to work on a mat. You really don't need to take this apart at the range or something like that. Like, this isn't a regular, a requirement to clean frequently. But if you do take it off, you just got to pay attention and do it in a place where you're not going to lose that. I mean, to me, this is about the same size as an AR-15 cotter pin. So it's not a small gun part, but I guess some people were losing it. And what was happening was, when they lost it, they weren't noticing they lost it. And they weren't noticing that when they reassembled the gun, the spring wasn't clicking in place. So if I leave the spring out and I put the pin in, it just goes in and you don't have any kind of feedback or click. And it'll work fine for a while until this pin starts to walk out during recoil. And so let's say it gets to about that place, probably something gives. Maybe it's the comp, maybe it's the pin that breaks, but you're gonna have a problem. So the point is, when you go to put this gun back together, definitely make sure you have your spring in place. Make sure you don't have like the spring sitting on your table or something, because it will potentially damage your compensator if you don't have it. So when you install the spring, it really can only go in one way. If you put it in backwards, it just stops. It won't go in. So you put it in correctly. It goes into its little slot like that. I didn't quite get it. It goes into its little slot. There's a hole at the back there. Just follow that line and it goes into place. Okay, now your spring is in. Install your O-ring. I usually put it on the muzzle just because I think you have a little more control. Okay, and then when you install it, just make sure you don't turn this thing upside down again. I like to put it in kind of sideways like this. Now I have the pin in place, or the comp in place rather, and I can just push my pin in, and I should feel that spring providing some resistance. So as I push this in, I should get a little click. And there it was. So you can feel it click in place. All right, so that's the correct installation. You can also pull your slide back and look and make sure the spring is still there, which isn't a bad idea. All right, but I just wanted to highlight that if you lose that spring and it falls out and you put your gun back together and you don't notice that it's not going together and you don't feel it click, you could damage the gun when you go to the range. So pay attention, be careful when you take things apart, make sure all the parts are accounted for. And as always, we love to help customers, so if you get stuck and need some help, give us a call, and we will see you next week.